can't make it or join halfway through. But good morning, afternoon, evening to everyone, depending on where you're joining from. I'm Brandon Taylor, one of the solutions engineers here at Pax8, and I'm joined on the Pax8 side by Aidan Clifford, our Microsoft Modern Workplace and Security Business Manager. We are delighted today to have Nerdio join us for a webinar. I'll just give a quick overview of the partnership between Pax8 and Nerdio, but firstly I'd introduce Jordan and Frank from Nerdio. But lately, Pax8 has been focusing on reducing risk, gaining efficiencies, and increasing revenue streams for our partner base. And I believe personally from working with Nerdio and communicating with Jordan and Frank that you can achieve all three of these while being able to automate and simplify a modern workplace management and deployment. So I'll hand it over to them, but feel free to jump any Q&A in during the webinar, and we'll have a little slot at the end for some Q&A as well. So Frank.
Awesome. Appreciate it, Brandon and Aidan. Great to be with you all here today. I'm coming to you from New York here in the USA, and I'll let Jordan introduce himself in a second, but just to let you all know who I am and what I do. I'm a partner success manager here at Nerdio, and so it's really my role to be talking to MSPs really worldwide about the virtues and the benefits of using Azure Virtual Desktop. And of course, using Nerdio to streamline what you're doing there and to be better at doing exactly that. So, Jordan, if you wouldn't mind, go ahead and introduce yourself to us, and we'll go and kick off.
Yeah, and my name's Jordan Wazwaz. I'm a sales engineer here at Nerdio. I actually live in Minnesota, so coming from the central part of the United States. And working with Frank, I like to say I'm his better half, helping to help MSPs with efficiencies, both cost and performance. I come from an MSP myself, worked from the help desk into an Azure engineer. So here to, just blend what I know with the Nerdio tool to help you guys maximize your efficiencies.
Awesome. Appreciate it, Jordan. Don't appreciate the comment, but I appreciate the intro nonetheless. So really what we want to talk about today, just to give a quick synopsis of the webinar, is we want to help you all simplify Azure Virtual Desktop and do so with Nerdio. So, building a cloud practice comes down to a few key pillars. We see it as standardization, simplification, and cost control. So many MSPs or managed service providers think that the cloud is risky. They've always done it the traditional way of on-premise hardware, and they don't really feel comfortable with changing their pricing or billing model. And just to throw a quick tidbit in there, I also come from an MSP of 8 years, and we literally came up against the same problem where we were afraid to change everything that we did and start putting our customers into the cloud. And so I have firsthand experience of kind of the pains and some of the issues that come with that. However, as soon as we partnered up with Nerdio 3-4 years ago, our cloud practice took off. And so the idea is we're going to bring those insights that we've learned from experience, and we're going to help our MSPs to start to build out that cloud practice if you haven't already. And so the other concern is about controlling costs. What you can see that the cloud can be expensive if you don't know what to look out for or even lack the proper tooling to guide you there. And so the webinar today is going to focus on how MSPs can build a successful cloud practice and how to open up new revenue opportunities using Azure Virtual Desktop and Nerdio. And so just from an agenda point of view, we're going to talk about how Azure Virtual Desktop and Nerdio can help MSPs to build that successful cloud practice. It sounds almost like a pipe dream sometimes if you've been stuck kind of in that on-prem infrastructure way of doing things, but really it's not so hard. We have very concrete steps that you can take using certain tools to get you there. We'll also talk about the benefits for the customer and for the MSP when you make that move to Azure Virtual Desktop. And then we'll calculate the true cost of Azure Virtual Desktop and some common ways that MSPs quote, propose, and package AVD for their customers. And then lastly, we'll save some time, a good amount of time, hopefully, for a brief demo of our Nerdio Manager for MSP product. And we really think you'll love seeing that up close and personal. And so first, I just want to start with Nerdio's mission. And so very, very simple. Our mission is to empower MSPs to build successful cloud practices with Microsoft Azure. And there's a lot of ways that we do that. I like to say that as much as Nerdio is a software company, and we provide a product that essentially helps you to better manage your Azure customers, your Intune customers in the cloud. But the other side of us that we do and we are tireless about is helping our MSPs to be better at what they do in bringing their customers to the cloud. So yes, our software will help power you to get there, but we also will help through consultation, all these things, free resources that I'll get into at the end that really help you to get exactly where you want to be. So the first thing I want to look at is the customer benefits when you move customers into Azure. So maybe, and this isn't an exhaustive list, but I've just put together some things that I think are very important to realize that as an MSP, your customer is going to ask, why should I move to the cloud? Or maybe they're already asking you to move to the cloud and you don't really feel comfortable talking about the pros, the cons, and other things like that. And so I just have a couple of points to talk through real quick is right off the top, you get free hardware upgrades within Azure. So you kind of ditch that life cycle of the 3 to 4 to 5 to 6 years of hardware, whether it be servers, desktops, laptops, you name it, needing to constantly replace that hardware. All you have to do in Azure, when a new VM series comes out, you simply resize that VM. It powers off, powers back on, and you have the brand new hardware right there at your disposal. So there's no painful migration involved. It's literally as easy as a reboot of that machine when that new hardware comes out. Of course, you're getting better performance and a lower cost as time goes on. So the idea behind Azure is so that you would always be at the latest on that latest and greatest hardware and not have to kind of stick behind on that older hardware. Just going to kind of talk through some high level points here. The ability to work from anywhere. Obviously, that's key, especially since the pandemic, and it continues to this day. And I feel like I don't know, I can't speak for everywhere in the world, but I know that hybrid work is a hot topic. A lot of folks are looking for working in the office while also working out of the office or working from home. And so, our world has changed a lot. And so the ability to kind of work from anywhere and have the same experience no matter where you are is huge. And so with Azure Virtual Desktop, you're signing into that same desktop no matter where you're working from that day. So there's continuity in the experience for your customer no matter where you are. A couple other things on this point is the ability to transition from that capital expense every 3 to 5 to 6 years, whether it be, as I said before, server hardware or desktop or laptop hardware. And now you turn that instead into an operating expense model. And so a lot of companies like that better than needing to budget for a large capital expenditure every couple of years. They'd prefer to just pay it monthly, similar to a lot of services we all subscribe to. A small amount each month is much better than a large lump sum a lot of times. And then there's predictability with your IT spend. It goes into that operating expense model where now you can see what it's going to cost you to run your infrastructure, to run your desktops, as opposed to these, kind of surprise costs when something breaks and things like that. Okay, so we talked about customer benefits to move to Azure. Now I want to talk about benefits for you as a managed services provider. And so MSPs are choosing Azure to get reduced labor cost internally for you as the MSP because you're standardizing on Azure's unique technology. And so, it's the same reason why most MSPs, I would say, like to standardize on the same security suites, right? Whether it be some sort of antivirus or EDR, MTR protection. Same reason that they're standardizing on the same firewalls or partnering with certain hardware manufacturers because they want their team to be able to see the same stack no matter what customer they're working with, right? And there's a lot of continuity there. There's a lot of ease of use for the MSP in that way. Well, by the same token, that mindset will also apply here with Azure. So if you start to build that modern MSP and standardize on moving your workloads for your customers into Azure, there's going to be a lot of standardization to come from that. And so the unique Azure technology that I'm talking about here is, Azure ADDF, Azure Files, Azure Virtual Desktop. Those things are things that you're not going to get if you stick with on-prem solutions, right? So a lot of these things, whether it be AADDS, Azure Files, which we can talk about further in depth down the road, but these are Microsoft's what I like to call platform as a service, right? So you're not maintaining an operating system for a domain controller if you use Azure ADDS. Microsoft is basically giving you a fully redundant domain controller as a service, and the same thing with Azure Files. No need to maintain the operating system, the Windows updates, the patches, all these things on operating systems. You can use these platforms as a service in that way. A couple other reasons that MSPs are choosing Azure is you get higher margins than with hardware. So I remember when I was at my MSP in sales, we were making, I don't know, 7% on a desktop sale, right? It was pennies on the dollar essentially when you're selling any type of desktop hardware or laptop hardware, any real hardware at all, really, because it's there's just not a lot of margin to be made for an MSP. Whereas now with Azure, we're seeing, and we'll talk about this some more, but MSPs are marking up anywhere from 30 to 70% of Azure spend. And so when you have the power to do that, now you're making, and which is that next bullet point, now you're making more of a predictable, sticky MRR for yourself at your MSP. And you're not necessarily waiting 5 years to make more money from this customer when they're due for a server refresh and you have to fight them tooth and nail to do it, right? Because they want to extend that life as long as possible. They don't want to spend that money if they don't feel as though they need to. And so now with Azure, you can have a much more predictable, a much more sticky MRR potential with Azure. Couple other reasons why MSPs are choosing Nerdio. So, so now to transition, rather, I meant to say from talking about why Azure is important for an MSP. Now I want to talk about why Nerdio is important for an MSP to use. And so our solution here at Nerdio sits on top of Azure. We don't lock you into using our product. So we sit outside of Azure, although we have all the capabilities while you're using us, let's say, to push all the buttons you need us to within Azure via our API into your customers' environments. But you don't necessarily, if you decide for some reason you don't want to use Nerdio for any given reason, you can rip it out and there's no lock-in required with us, right? So a lot of vendors, they'll kind of put you in their own cloud, they'll own the tenant, they'll own the subscription, things like that. We don't work that way. You as the MSP will hold on to that subscription. You all will make your margins on that subscription that you provision for your customers through Pax8, and you guys can go and make your margin that way. We're not going to try to own that spend. That's for you to make your money off of that way. Another reason is that we're designed specifically for MSPs. So we've built our product from the ground up geared towards MSPs. And so the idea behind that is we have, which Jordan will get into in the product demo in a bit, but we have designed it so that you can have multi and cross-tenant management of all your customers. And so a big problem with native Microsoft solutions is kind of have to play that game of juggling, incognito tabs and global admin credentials for this tenant, that tenant, and everything in between. We've built one place, one single pane of glass that you can go to manage your Microsoft stack. Even your Azure AD users, common tasks within Azure AD and 365, that's also built into our product, and Jordan will talk on that as well. These last couple things I'm going to mention here, especially when it comes to guidance and assistance, these things are complementary. And so as I mentioned before, yes, we're a software company, but we're also a consulting company for MSPs. And so anytime you have an opportunity that you're considering to bring into Azure Virtual Desktop or to bring into Azure, we will provide you with no-cost sales engineering. So we will work with you to build out that cost estimate so you can feel really comfortable going into that pricing engagement and making that proposal for your customer. Once that proposal is approved and you say, okay, we're ready to go live, but we don't know exactly what to do, we will provide you with a resource on our side known as a go live engineer who will help you through the implementation. So if you have questions, we'll help get you those questions answered immediately. We will open a direct Teams channel with you so that you can feel confident in what you're doing here with Nerdio, and we give you the resources you need. And then lastly, once you have customers in Nerdio, we'll actually perform Azure business reviews with you just to make sure that meeting best practices post-implementation, right? So maybe something was missed, maybe you didn't understand something, or whatever the case may be, something has changed in the customer environment. We can go through that environment after the fact with a fine-tooth comb to make sure that everything's running optimally as well. Lastly, on this, couple last things I just want to touch on thread here is we'll talk a little bit about the workflows that we have within Nerdio. And so these are things that Jordan's going to get into in just a bit, but things that you can really limit what can and cannot be done within your customers' Microsoft environments, whether it be Azure Virtual Desktop, Intune, and the like, to make sure that you're protecting your MSP from maybe someone who didn't realize that they shouldn't press that button because it's going to blow up the server, right? So you can kind of put those guardrails around that way, and we'll talk about that a little bit. We also have integrations built in with many of the most common RMM and AV tools within Nerdio to really help you kickstart with whatever RMM or AV you're using to integrate right in. And then also the ability we have to make changes globally across all clients, whether it be maintaining a desktop image, a global desktop image that you can push down to other customer environments, scripted actions that you can automate different things within the platform, and even giving you a dashboard view of all your customers within Azure to be able to see that in one place, whether it be a backups dashboard or devices dashboard, whatever it may be. We can show you a little bit about that. All right, last slide or two, and I'm going to kick it over to Jordan here in just a minute. But I always like to show this here because I feel like, you may still have questions like, okay, it all sounds good. I like what I'm hearing, but really, what is Nerdio? What do we do? Why do we do it? And I feel like this slide really will kind of put that picture together. So anything you see in blue there at the top of your screen, these are components of Azure that we will help you manage from Nerdio, whether it be virtual desktops, your Active Directory and identity, any virtual machines, file server, domain controller, app server, whatever it may be, your networking, your backup, and your file storage. All those things that live within Azure, you will be able to manage from Nerdio's dashboard. And then at the bottom here, these are what we call our 4 key pillars as to why we do what we do. And so a big hang up for a lot of MSPs to kind of get started with moving their customers to the cloud is they feel as though they can't accurately price their customers. And so if you've ever kind of been in the Azure price calculator, you've probably had some bad experiences, I would imagine. I know personally I did when I was trying to use it myself. And so what we've actually done is we've created a cost estimator tool ourselves that pulls real-time pricing information from Azure, imports it into our tool so that we can, it's more of a Q&A. So, how many virtual desktops do you need? And Jordan will show this in a sec, so I don't want to waste too much time on it, but it's a much better experience for you as the MSP to be able to reliably quote your customer for Azure. And then once you've gotten that quote approved, now you need to go and deploy that solution. And so we tout 1 hour customer deployments for any greenfield environment, meaning that you give us a couple of tidbits of information for your customer environment, and Nerdio will go and push all the buttons on the back end to build that environment out for you. Once you've been deployed, now we help you to ongoing manage and optimize your environments. And so we'll show off a lot of this in the demo, but auto scaling is key. And so that's how you can really help keep costs down within Azure Virtual Desktop and using capabilities that only Nerdio will provide you with doing. So ensuring that you're not running virtual desktops longer than you need to, right? So if folks are only running 40 to 50 hours a week in a virtual desktop, then at that point, why do you need to keep that machine on longer than you need to? Since Azure is a consumption-based price model, we help to keep those costs down by optimizing that. Just gonna fly through this quick because Jordan's gonna give us a real life scenario. But just to at a high level show you, this is a 32 user Azure Virtual Desktop environment. And right at the top in gray, you're gonna see that, essentially this customer would be paying over $1,000 per month if they didn't optimize their Azure Virtual Desktop environment. But by a couple of things that we can do with Nerdio, by, as I mentioned, shutting off virtual machines that don't need to be running, making some changes to the virtual disks within Azure as well to optimize the environments there, we can save customers 68% off of what they would have been spending without using Nerdio in that way. So I've kind of shown how we can save money on paper. The last thing I want to show is how we can save you money in time. And so even if, let's say, your MSP has an advanced, Azure expert on staff, even if that were true, which many MSPs don't, especially if they don't have a lot of cloud customers, in that case, it's still going to take more time to do some of the most common tasks within Azure, to do it natively within Azure, as opposed to using our automation that's built into Nerdio. And so things like desktop image management, user management on a daily or weekly basis, even if you have relatively basic knowledge of Azure and Nerdio, you're going to still be able to do these things quicker than if you were to have an Azure expert on staff. And so hopefully that's helped to give a really good high-level overview of what we do, why we do it, and how we do it. And so Jordan, I'd like to at this time kick it over to you, if you wouldn't mind going through a cost estimator from our tool and showing off to the audience how this all works.
Yeah, we'll do. Thanks, Frank. Let me just pull that up and share my screen. All right, so you're taking a look here. This is Nerdio. This is the root level, we kind of call it, or the MSP level. So right away, and I'll get into more of this in a moment here, but I'm going to start with the cost estimator quick. And so what our cost estimator does, this comes prepackaged inside of the Nerdio tool. At the very top, you're going to see once this populates, the reason it's taking a moment here is it's hitting a region that I've not been to before. So what it does is it's actually pulling live from the Azure API so that you're getting the most up-to-date pricing information. So you'll see here right away, it's going to ask your region. And then it's going to also give you the dollar amount that you would like to use or the denomination. Oops. So in this example, if we're deploying into South Central, this is inside of Texas, I believe. So what we can do here, let's do like a 40 user desktop deployment. So right away, what our tool is doing is it's starting and it's just asking us, hey, let's get some information. How many users are going to use virtual desktops? So if I plug 40 here on the side, and we move down to the next question, it's going to ask us how many users have GPU pooled desktop needs? Well, I'm going to do a QuickBooks deployment. So for a QuickBooks deployment, in this case, none of them are going to need a GPU. And then right now, then it's asking, oh, I apologize, I skipped a box. How many need personal dedicated? And that's going to be 0 for QuickBooks. How many need GPU? We're going to do 0, and then it's going to assume the rest are pooled. So we get a total of 40 here. What our box is doing, box A, it's asking us, hey, how many of these machines do we want to maintain 24/7? So you can choose to do any number of machines that are in this pool to make 24/7. And I apologize, I should maybe even slow down. To articulate further, this is the pooled desktop. So this is going to be the collection of machines that the staff are going to log into and share. Similar to an RDS collection if you come from that world, or the Citrix space. But in the AVD space, we're going to call this a host pool. So in this host pool, we're going to have 40 users. And what I should touch on is on the side here, this is the machine size. So this might sound like Greek initially or something that's just foreign when you're looking through all of these numbers and all of these SKUs. But working with the Nerdio or Pax8 teams, you'll be able to identify easily what these are and what you need to use. And they'll become second nature to you. So what I'll do here is we're going to do an 8-core machine. An 8-core machine with 64 gigs. Now, what's cool is you'll see our calculator, it's going to change this box automatically. So if I bump this back to an E4S, it's going to shoot this back up to a 5. And so there's an algorithm, and what it's taking into consideration here is the ratio of workers, of how many workers per CPU core you want to use. So in this case, duo worker, we can set this to custom if we want and do something like a 1.5. And again, every change that we're making here is reflecting this number. Now, the other cool piece is up here on the top right. This is actually reflecting live costs as well. So you'll see the $51 per user, $660 in Azure spend. Every time I manipulate something within our calculator, it's going to make a change to this live metric on the side. Another cool thing that we have inside of our calculator, and this is just something in general that we do that's not native, is we're able to do what we call a disk flip. Really what this is doing is it doesn't manipulate any data, but what it allows us to do is set the running OS disk type, use premium, and then when the machine is turned off with our auto scale feature, it's going to swap it to an HDD, and then you're going to get billed at a reduced rate. No risk of data corruption. It doesn't actually move or change any data. It's simply there for us. We use infrastructure as code to trick Microsoft and get a little bit of extra margin there. Now, one thing you'll notice too, on the top right, this is set to 705 currently for the monthly Azure spend. Generally, if we switch this to a P10 and then use the disk flip, by default, this is set to a standard or a standard SSD, an E series disk. A P series is a better version. So if we switch to this better version, you're going to see the price actually drops by a decent chunk. So you're able with Nerdio to run premium disk, but still reduce your rate and increase your margin. So just a small way that we are able to help you as the MSP increase your margins. In this case, what this is also doing, so it's asking us, hey, how many hours a week are these users typically working? The reason this is important is it's actually going to fix or change the rate, of course, or change the total based off the number of hours that they're working. So if we put 55, again, this total is going to increase. It's also important because there's something in the Azure space called the reserved instance. This is where you're paying and telling Microsoft you're going to commit to a certain time frame on a machine, and then you get a predictable cost monthly. So if we're over 60 hours in this box, I'm going to work with MSPs and talk to them about whether they should be doing reserved instance versus auto scaling. So we're doing everything we can, looking at every metric to make sure that you as the MSP get a reliable and accurate quote that you're able to predictably use to earn your MRR. So servers we're able to add down below. We could add any number of servers here. Say we wanted to add a DC for this 40 user environment. We can choose the size. And again, as you see here, the size is reflecting the live cost. So you're able to quickly identify, if you did want to try and go with 2 cores versus 4 cores, what's that going to look like? In this case, we're going to just use a B2MS. We're able to flip through the OS disk. So you'll see here all of the different disks that are available to you to attach to a VM are here. Oops, scrolling a little too fast. The price is reflected. So we could give this a P10 if we wanted to. Again, keeping an eye on all the live changes we're making. We can choose to, we're going to add that QuickBooks server, jumping ahead of myself. We're just going to do a 2-core, 8 GB machine. You'll see versioning inside of here. These are some of the things that you'll learn if you work with us at Nerdio. So versioning V3, V4, V5. These all equate to the version of hardware actually in the Microsoft data center. So the older the version, the slower or the older the actual hardware is. Sorry about that. One moment. And the slower the hardware is, apologies. One thing you'll notice though is that the price is the same. So we always kind of preach to folks that whenever the V5s are available, that you'd want to take that. You're going to go from 2.5 gigahertz on a V3 CPU to 3.5 gigahertz on a V5 CPU. We're going to be able to plug in our data disk. We'll go ahead and say that they have 2 terabytes of data. You can quote any of your Microsoft licensing here. So whether that's going to be business, premium, E3, E5, whatever they need for their AVD entitlements. We also include any of the other licensing that MSPs are often quoting and reselling. So Office 365 Suite, Windows 10, Microsoft Defender, SQL Server is a big one that people are utilizing here often. And then of course, anything other that you would like to sell them, you could just kind of use this to quote it out. Another piece, of course, so if they already have business premium licensing, you could always just uncheck this from the Nerdio tool. And now you're just looking at pure Azure infrastructure costs. Now, if we scroll down, we're going to take a look at Azure Hybrid Benefit. Azure Hybrid Benefit is a weird way of Microsoft saying that if you spin up a server operating system inside of Azure, that they're going to lease you the operating systems. They're going to lease you the server OS right away. Now, that's great for admin overhead. You don't have to make sure that you're compliant. You don't have to worry about compliance. It's already there for you, but it's the most expensive way to purchase Azure Hybrid Benefit. A good way to illustrate this is let me switch this to a D8 machine. We'll do a D8S V5. So you'll see that the cost currently is $13.60 a month. Now, by utilizing Azure Hybrid Benefit for 3 years, what that is that's saying that we're going to go to Pax8 and we're going to say, hey, Pax8, we need an 8-core Windows Server license pack. We're going to go ahead and pay you $640 USD in this case, one time upfront for 3 years. And you'll see that it reduces that cost from 1,600, I believe it was, down to 1,092, 1,300, apologies. So on an 8-core server, though, you're saving about $270 or $220 a month. So you'll ROI on this 640 in about 3 months. So again, these are just some of the small conversations that we're having at Nerdio with you as we're quoting this out, looking at what's best for you, when you should take advantage of this, whether it's a POC or a production environment, and what your ROI is going to be for any of these. Reserved instances is something we have a conversation about as well. Similar concept, there's about 60% savings to be had per VM that you utilize reserved instances for. Utilizing reserved instances sounds scary. It's a 3-year commit. However, there's no cancellation fee currently from Microsoft. They do have some contract language stating they may choose to start enforcing a 12% cancellation fee in the future. But on the next page, I'll walk you through how Nerdio kind of makes that a no-brainer as well on whether you should or should not utilize it. We break down what those fees would be, and usually it's going to be a 2-3 month ROI there as well. So again, a little more conversation to be had about where the break even is on this and why it's a no-brainer on the next page. We're able to quote our in-region backup here. We can do 30 days, 4 weeks, 12 months. Maybe you have some sort of 7-year compliance for a financial industry, something like that. The more you back up, the more you spend. But what's nice is you're able to, again, just quote this all out here. Moving down, we have VPN. These are the 3 most common SKUs. There are many more in the Azure world, but we put the most common that MSPs are utilizing today. This is the Azure or the Nerdio hosting costs. We generally don't have people include this on the quote, but it is there in case you wanted to. You could quote Azure AA, or sorry, that was redundant. You could quote AADDS, Azure Active Directory Domain Services. This is a serverless version of Active Directory in the cloud, where Microsoft handles the operating system, but you get the Kerberos and DC functionality. We could quote additional FSLogix storage here, FSLogix, or rather not even FSLogix, but Azure file storage, whether that's premium or standard. So if they had maybe 2 terabytes on a file server that they wanted to offload, they could do that here. Swap that to standard. Here's where we're able to quote FSLogix. For those who are unfamiliar, FSLogix is the modern roaming profile solution. Microsoft worked to containerize the profile and wrap it up in a VHDX or a virtual disk image. That disk image gets attached to the server OS at logon for the user, and it reads and writes to that. It's a much better solution, but it does cost money to store that data, so we quote that in here. If it's a big CPA firm, maybe you're looking at doing 30 gigabytes. Something smaller, some insurance brokerage, maybe you're looking at a much smaller profile. Again, looking under every rock to make sure that we're quoting this appropriately. So we're even looking at bandwidth and storage operations. An RDP connection does have a small amount of bandwidth because you do pay for egress traffic from Azure. So we're factoring that in here for you, as well as those storage operations. And then lastly, as we get to the bottom of our calculator, we really are trying to help you get to the bottom line and know what your true cost is going to be. So you could add whatever discount you're getting from Pax8 in here, any software discounts, CSP discounts for RI, and then lastly, your Nerdio partner tier. So if you end up, getting a discount from us at Nerdio for your partner tier, you can reflect that in here as well. And if you go up to Platinum, our standard license is $12 per user, but you can get all the way down to 75% off at $3 a user. So. And then the very bottom line here is kind of what Frank mentioned earlier, right? Where we can mark up our Azure. So you can include Azure margin, 365 margin, and then even some margin on the Nerdio licenses themselves. So Azure margin, we're seeing anywhere from 30 to 75%, and sometimes even higher depending on the deployment situation. I want to do one thing here. I want to take off AADDS, take off this additional storage. I just want to show what the true cost kind of looks like. So, realistically, if you were to spin up a 40 user QuickBooks environment for the Azure infrastructure, and that's including our Nerdio licensing, you're looking at roughly $53 and $2,100 USD to support that environment. Now that's your MSRP. That's without you reaping any margin. So, if you put 50% margin on here, you're able to go resell this to the client at $73 a user. So I just want to stop here. I went really fast. I want to make sure I have time to show the full product. So I just want to see if anybody has any questions before I move on to kind of a full product demo. Oh, I apologize.
Thanks, Jordan. I might.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
That's right. I might just jump in with a question there, because I see that the Nerdio cost estimator is a bit more of a simplified / MSP focused version, like overlay of the Azure cost calculator, which I know a lot of partners have struggled with in the past. It does look a lot more simplified and purposeful here, but it probably still does take a bit of onboarding for partners to get used to that. Are there ways that that Nerdio can help partners sort of build that muscle and that confidence with that cost estimator?
Yeah, that's a great question, Aidan. So that's part of what we offer, and that part of what I think Frank was mentioning earlier, right? In terms of how we offer these free services that we like to consider make us, like we call our partners, right? We don't have clients, we have partners, because we work with you to empower you to actually be Azure experts yourself. We're there for you to work with us. But to your point, I have people that are on their 30th quote with us at Nerdio, 30th deployment. And at this point, what they're doing is they're running through the cost estimator. I've guided them through. They're quoting everything out, and they're just sending it over to us via email for me to, double check their work. I give them the green lights, give them their gold star, tell them they're doing great. And, that's how we're empowering partners. And before you know it, they don't even need us. So I think that was a great question.
Awesome. No, thanks for running us through that one.
No problem. All right, cool. And then, sorry, I was going to show one last thing. I apologize before I jump. We do have another per cost page, and I think this is really helpful because this really does break down, right, what your spend is and where it's going. So you have that $640 one-time upfront spend to Pax8 for Windows Server license, $73 per user. Here's another breakdown of how much it is on Azure spend, how much it is for Nerdio, and then your actual total spend. In here, it's going to break down any of the licenses that you opted in for and what those costs are going to be. Here's the actual infrastructure stack, any disks that are associated with the machine, where the Windows Server pack is going to apply, which is on this QB server. And then if we jump down here, it actually breaks down all of your Azure spend. So, server storage, the pooled desktops are going to cost $804, server compute up here at $242. And then one thing I always like to point out, right, is the cost of Nerdio at $480 a month. Just in auto scale savings alone in this deployment, we're saving you $1,500. So we overshadow your savings, but overshadow with savings the cost of our product with just one simple aspect of the tool, not even just deployment savings or the other optimizations and automations that we have. So just like to point that out. And then I'll jump in. I'm just going to move over to top level here and take a look at the full product then. So, taking a look at our full product, this is the root level. This is taking a look here, Winhart, Juliet. These are all of our test accounts and clients that we have in here. I'm really going to start at kind of the MSP layer and some of the rails that you can put on your environment before I get into the technical. So, right away, we have users and roles. So role assignments, you can let in both internal and external if you're doing any co-manage. You can let internal IT in here, give them a particular role definition. Make it so that they can only see their account. Maybe they can only do session disconnects, profile resets, certain items like that. Again, really build them a walled garden, but still allow them to come in here. On that note as well of letting external folks in here, under settings and white label, we have the ability for you to change all of the colors to your own, change this icon in the top left from Nerdio to your icon. Or your company symbol. Nerdio Manager for MSP can be white labeled. The URL itself can be changed. All of this to effectively hide that you're using Nerdio and make it look like it's just an internal tool. Jumping back to role definitions really quick. This is a custom RBAC list and a custom RBAC rule set. So this gives more functionality than you would typically have inside of Azure. So jumping into here, you can see these are all different components of Azure and then the way that they interact with Nerdio. So you could create or edit any of these roles. So they come pre-canned in the tool, but you're able to edit them, clone from them, or change them as needed, and then even add your own down here at the bottom. Call this, internal help desk 1 or client X help desk, whatever the case is, and give them access to the Nerdio tool. Along with role assignments and role definitions, we have the task categories and approval rules. So we have cost impacting, destructive, Intune actions. If we look at cost impacting, for example, these are various items that can impact your spend inside of Azure. So with these, again, you can create your own, customize or change them, but they do come all pre-canned for you out of box. You can use approval rules then with those task categories. Here we have one for Intune and cost management. So for the customer Winhart, anything that's cost impacting that gets submitted from an account admin or an MSP admin is going to submit an email or generate an email to the super admin. They then have to approve or deny that change. It sits in a queue and then it goes through. Or if you don't want to have that change go through, you can go back to that individual and have that conversation. The cost impacting rule will even give you what those estimated changes are going to look like as the super admin in that email. So you can very quickly at a glance see if it's going to be an expensive or cheap change that you can let go through. Continuing on the theme of kind of Rails and alerting notifications, we have conditions. So auto scale, backup failure, backup success, even some sales ops type things like buying Azure Hybrid Benefit or buying reserved instances when we create servers. Again, here, able to customize and add your own multiple different tasks that you can choose from. I mean, as you can see, it's a very extensive list. These are all just different tasks that the Nerdio application is taking. And you can create any level of conditions around these tasks. And then with that comes email alerts based on those. So you can use this to help tie into your ticketing system. On that note as well, we also have, sorry, I forget which tab it's on. We do have the REST API with Swagger documentation. So if you're interested, you can use the REST API and this documentation page to interact directly with ticketing systems, RMM tools, anything that utilizes REST API. That's the majority of what I have in terms of, again, kind of some of the administrative pieces, keeping Rails on the environment. If we come up to the top here, then what we're looking at is global views. Anybody who's working in Azure today will find that this is super helpful. If you wanted to see user sessions for various clients, or if you want to see all the session hosts for various clients, that's going to require you to open up an incognito browser for each individual client, sign in with your global admin account, jump into the session hosts. Here at Nerdio, you can go ahead and just set a global view for anything that you can come up with, anything that your mind wants. Go ahead and select a global view for it or create that global view for it. And without having to open a bunch of incognito windows and jump around, you're able to take a look at all of your backups, all of your devices. And again, these are all global views. Keeping on the theme of global items, we do have global images as well. So again, the idea is you're able to create a single desktop image that has, maybe some registry keys or whatever settings that you want to have in place. You can create that image and then use this as the base for every new customer that you onboard. Add their line of business apps from there, make any customizations, and go ahead and proceed. And then we also have down here under settings. I apologize. I always space on the tab under pressure. We have the ability to set up global RDP properties and global FS Logics properties as well. So with this global FS Logic setting, every customer that gets created, we're able to then just simply assign this out to them, and they'll have these FS Logic settings. So if that's something that you guys were interested in, you could just create a template and then push that out and keep FS Logic standard across all of your customer deployments. Same thing with those global RDP properties. If you wanted to, make it standard, default HIPAA, default SOC 2, and then for any client that's relative to, you can simply assign that out when needed. All right, enough of the boring admin stuff. Let's get into some of the technical. Let me jump into an account really quick and show you what you're able to manipulate in here. You have your AVD host pools, your desktop images. Desktop imaging, I think, is a big piece that natively is kind of lacking in Azure. So the ability to power on an image, the ability to schedule this image to power on, the ability to schedule it to power off after a particular time frame. You can run scripted actions against it. So what's really cool here is you can actually schedule this image to turn on, schedule it to power off after 8 hours. This 8-hour time frame that you have it scheduled to power on during, you can have set as your RMM patch window and actually just set Nerdio to install your RMM. Once Nerdio installs your RMM, it's going to turn on the machine for you automatically, install your RMM tool. Your RMM tool patches the machine. Nerdio is going to uninstall your RMM tool and then patch the machine, and then power off the image for you. Jumping into the host pool then, you can also do the inverse and actually apply that image and do some reimaging. So you can reimage an entire host pool. There could be 20 machines in this host pool and you can reimage at the touch of a button. You can go ahead and select the VM size, resize a machine, switch the disk, do a reimage, do this all in a schedule so you can get confirmation from a client of what a good time to do this is at, schedule it so that your team never has to actually manually jump in and babysit. We have auto scale. Now there is native Azure auto scale, but auto scaling in Azure is effectively an on-off switch. There's a little bit of logic that you can apply, but not much. We have auto scaling where we can do CPU, RAM, average active sessions, available sessions, user driven, and even a combination if you would like. Trying to look here. Here again is the disk flip. You're able to pre-stage machines. This is effectively saying that Tuesday and Wednesday by 8 a.m. we want one machine to turn on. We have an auto heal functionality. So Azure Virtual Desktop works off the AVD agent. The AVD agent, if it's unavailable, has no active sessions, Nerdio will just simply remove and recreate that host. That way you're not getting reports that staff are unable to log in. And there's a lot of different things you can do with auto heal. This is just a very basic setup. You can still manipulate and manage servers from within Nerdio, adding disk, resizing VMs, deleting VMs. This is anything that you'd normally be able to do from the server action pane. You can effectively do from in here. You can even manage your reservations. You could create a reservation, enter all the invoice information, and then go ahead and create some alerting around that as well. VNet, VPN, all of this can be created. Really what we're doing here in Nerdio, I think Frank kind of touched on this earlier as well, right? None of what we're doing is outside of what you can do in native Azure. We just clean it up. We really make it more palatable for an MSP, and even for somebody who's an Azure admin. You know, we take out the fluff and we really keep in just what an MSP is utilizing and what an MSP needs. Azure files are in here. You're able to create, manage, auto-scale Azure files. This is something not native, something kind of proprietary to Nerdio, the ability to auto-scale these containers. I know I'm running short on time here, and I want to make sure we have time for Q&A. So before I just kind of keep going, I want to make sure I stop and ask if anybody has any questions or anything specifically they want me to jump in or kind of highlight during this demo.
Jordan, at least for me, I don't know if you did yet, if you could touch on just the users at the top, the user management, if we didn't get to that yet. I think that's super powerful as well, just from my perspective.
No, thank you, Frank. I appreciate that. So I think Frank makes a good point, right? This is super powerful in the sense that a single pane of glass. You know, again, we don't have to jump in through multiple windows, no incognito tabs, and you're able to manipulate a user from within here. These are the Azure AD accounts. You know, you can change first name, primary, usernames, manipulate all of their groups. This is huge, as you can actually change their licensing from within here. So, you know, without having to jump into the Azure portal, you can make this the Azure portal for even your help desk. So this isn't just for your Azure admins, your engineers, people doing deployments. This is for the level 1 guys that don't want to have to open a million incognito windows, that want to have a much more palatable interface to work within. You can take a look at the desktops that they have access to, remote apps. This is looking at the Intune piece and configuration profiles, compliance policies that are applied. You know, I could do a whole hour on Intune or AVD independently too, so we didn't even get into the Intune functionality. That is a piece of our suite that we offer as well, as not just AVD, but full Intune, app deployment, device management, profile management, being able to create global templates and apply those profiles out. Here, I'll take a few moments and touch on that real quick. So here's some of the configuration profiles, compliance policies, security baselines. These are all different things that, again, come pre-canned for you. So you don't have to be an Intune expert to come in here. We have deploy wallpaper already created. You just have to upload the custom image that you want to utilize, and boom, deploy wallpaper is ready to go for your customer. Disable advertising ID. You don't even need to do anything custom here. Just apply this to a customer. Good to go. Big functionality that people I think are finding value in is the fact that you can import. So if you're somebody who's working in Intune today, you know that you have to jump in and create policies at an individual level per customer. Now you're able to come in here, import a policy at your MSP layer into Nerdio, or from a customer, you can extract a policy. So if you've created one in a customer, or maybe you take on a customer that has an advanced Intune stack, well, you can now extract their Intune policy, repurpose them, and push those out to your existing customers as well. So tons of different things that I can touch on here, but again, I do want to make sure I leave plenty of time for Q&A. So again, I can definitely keep going, but want to make sure I stop and ask for any further questions as well.
Jordan, I haven't received any in the chat, but feel free anyone to ask out. In the meantime, I just had a question around the users' capabilities. Is there a minimum license that the partners or the customers require to utilize some of this function? Obviously, if it's higher up the chain, there's probably more functionality within there, but is there a minimum license to be onboarded to these tools?
So business premium from the Microsoft side of things is the minimum license in terms of that gets you Intune functionality, the ability to virtualize both Windows 11 and Windows 10, so the AVD stack. It's going to get you Defender on top of all the different like conditional access and things like that. So I would say from the Microsoft side, it's business premium, and then from the Nerdio side, we only offer one license at Nerdio. If you're paying for AVD, it gets you both, the functionality to the full tool set if you're paying for an AVD user.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
All right, appreciate that, Jordan. I think that was obviously super helpful. I don't know if it's coming across yet, but I did just try to share out really the last slide that we had for today, and so I'm just going to reshare that real quick. But I have a link on there that I wanted to give to everyone, and we're actually hosting a training camp in Sydney, Australia coming up here. And so let me know if you guys can see that slide here. Just have a Q&A slide open for you. Perfect. So at this point, if there's any other questions, of course, feel free. But as far as that training camp, so basically what we do is we hold a 2-day event where we have a 1-day training. Let's say the first day is all for sales. So how to package Azure, how to price it, how to deliver the proposal, different pricing options that you can provide to your customer, or different methods by which you can price it. And a lot of folks really need some help in that area, especially as you're getting started. There's several different methods you can employ, and Jordan and I were talking earlier today. Sometimes what one method is good for maybe you here may not be good for another, or your client may not be the best way to do that same method. So a couple ways we can talk through that, and that's day one, really sales training there, and day two is all about the technical training. So how to actually deploy an AVD or Azure environment using Nerdio, how to actually support that environment going forward. What are some common help desk tickets that you may get, and how to equip your team for kind of being ready to receive those types of questions and needs from there. And so that QR code is in the upper right hand corner. We cover 2 nights of a hotel stay. We cover all the training complimentary, and of course we provide meals for you while you're with us too. And so we really want to give you a great experience, but make sure that it's all packed into a 2-day event where you leave feeling super confident about making your pitches for Azure. And so that's actually coming next month, July 25th and 26th. And so all you have to do is get there. So if you're in Australia, you're in New Zealand, somewhere close by, you want to make your way over to the training camp, make an event out of it, and feel free to book your spot. All you have to do is register online and find your way over there. So that's everything we have for you here today. If you have any questions, feel free to pop them into chat for the next couple minutes before we wrap up. And Aidan and Brandon, feel free to jump in if there's anything else you guys wanted to add as well. But my contact info is on there. If you have any questions post-meeting here, feel free to send me an email, reach out, and Pax8 team will make sure our contact info is accessible to you all as well if you need us.
Awesome. Thanks very much for that, Frank. Brody, I saw you had your hand up there for a moment. Did you have a question, or was it just a misclick? Feel free to jump in if you still have that question there. All good. Well, Frank, I've got another question. I'm full of questions off the session, so thanks very much for putting that one together. Something I was interested in was when you're talking around some of the processes and the templates and the notifications that you can put in place to really build the efficiency for later deployments. I'd like to get some insights around the first deployment, because I know working with partners in the past who've started AVD by themselves, they've been putting like hours and hours and hours into building that practice themselves. Are you able to talk about probably some of the time savings and efficiencies that they'll get with that sort of first deployment, and then how that saves further on as well?
Yeah, for sure. That first deployment, right away, I would say you want to leverage our Go Live engineer to walk you through step by step, right? And so that's us being a partner to you and making sure that you feel comfortable during that implementation. But as far as automation is concerned, there's really just maybe 4 or 5 steps that you have to fill out, right? Like you have to connect to that customer's tenant with the global admin. You have to pick which region you want to set up the environment in, like little things like that you're going to do initially as we walk you through. And then really what's going to happen is within that hour time frame, all the environment's going to get built out for you. So your VNets are going to get created, your subnet, your all these other things, components that are required. The baseline is going to get configured there, right? That landing zone will be configured by Nerdio for you optimally. And then from there, a couple steps will remain. It's really creating your desktop image, installing your custom software, whether it be your Adobe or Office apps, things like that. You'll go and you'll install that on your desktop image. And then once that desktop image is ready to be deployed, all you have to do is click a couple buttons in Nerdio to basically sysprep that image, prepare it to be deployed into a host pool. And so once it's deployed into a host pool, AVD is super easy to use. Microsoft has created such simplicity around it where your customers can now sign into their virtual desktop once they've been assigned to a host pool with their Azure AD account, right? Their 365 login. They can go and get signed in over a public URL that Microsoft provides, or with a remote desktop client that's accessible from the Apple app, App Store, or even from the Microsoft Store. And so they just simply have to sign in, and now they're signed into that virtual desktop from there.
Awesome. And yeah, so thinking about sorry, you go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and in terms of getting those foundations in place, right? Like I think when you're getting those notifications, all of your alerts in place, like you said, once you kind of have some legwork to do at the beginning, but once you put your foundation in place, it really does keep the rails on, and it keeps it just keeps everything clean. It allows you to scale super efficiently because you can let people in. You can let them in knowing that you're not going to break things, that you're not going to have them increasing your Azure spend. People aren't going to accidentally destroy things. But yeah, I think to your point, there's a little bit to set up, but then once those automations are in place, you're really set up for success to let people loose inside of Nerdio.
Hey guys,
Awesome.
one last thing I just wanted to add as well, Aidan. Apologies, I want to give you a chance to if you were going to say something there, but I got an email from Brody who's still hanging in with us, and he was saying he couldn't post his question in chat there, so. He was wondering about, whether or not for the Intune piece, if you have the ability to import existing policies from other tenants. And the answer is 100% yes, right? So like that's the beauty of Nerdio is all that hard work you've done at customer A, customer B, customer C, you don't have to go and rebuild that all over again. You can very easily import that that policy, that profile that you've built out, all of them, import them back to what we would call your MSP repository. And now you can go and you can drag and drop assign those out to other customers as you see fit. Hopefully that's helpful there as well.
And something to add on to that as well, Frank, is that I don't know if you guys mentioned it, but the Intune and AVD can be separate as well, right? You can just get the Intune management as a standalone license.
Correct.
Absolutely can.
Perfect. I think I saw Brady's hand go up, so it's awesome so thanks very much for emailing that question in. It's always best to hear from the audience what the questions are there. I was just going to sort of follow up from what you were saying, Frank and Jordan, just around just thinking about that speed to market. So what Brandon said at the start about we're always trying to think of ways to grow partners' businesses and gain efficiencies within those businesses as well. So it seems like Nerdio is a really good tool to speed up the quickness to market and launching into market. So you can actually use that opportunity cost of the time saved and put those resources into qualifying more opportunities and getting more deployments and more services opportunities over the line. So yeah, no, it sounds like definitely something worth diving into a bit more.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more. If anyone has any other questions for me, again, my contact info is here up on the screen. Training camp is there to go and register for. Would love to have you with us. And even if you need help getting started, you're like, hey, this looks good. I need a little bit more, personal one-on-one maybe time just